This is the final panel of the event, and we're going to move a little bit from semiconductor companies to companies that are born and raised in other sectors, in research in medtech and advanced manufacturing, but that have two unique traits for this event: the use of semiconductors, but also their location already here in Mac Park. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the history of some of these companies and organisations, and the value that Mac Park has brought. And so. My connection to the event, and Devor and James and others, is around my work in precincts and innovation precincts, and the bringing together of the research ecosystem together with the startup ecosystem and the commercial ecosystem with government and cash in order to grow various sectors across Australia. And so Macquarie Park has a long established history of excellent research, great companies and strong commercialisation. So we're here to hear a little bit about those that have tread the boards and been successful in this space and learn a little bit more. And so Peter, I might start with you. Saluda is a medtech company. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Saluda and its history and its use in semiconductors?
Sure. This is a slightly different answer to the one I had in mind, but AWA Microelectronics, that became Solana, built the application-specific integrated circuit, the chip that went into the first Telectronics pacemakers. I think Telectronics were the first company, were equal first to build a pacemaker, battery-operated implantable pacemaker with this chip in it. From AWA Micro, now Solana, so Telectronics. My first job was with AWA Micro. Telectronics created a spin-out called Cochlear. I designed a chip for Cochlear. I worked for Cochlear. I learned a lot about biotech from Cochlear. Left Cochlear, and then a while later joined a startup supported by Dave Skellen, who's in the room at NICTA, was a research facility. Thanks, Dave. One of our parents, if you will, as a company. And that was about 15 years ago, and we're now selling in Australia, the US and Europe. We have a custom ASIC that was specified in Sydney, designed in Adelaide by a company, Radlogic, who are a bunch of ex-Oztech people from another one of them. Then we get it built in Sarawak at an X-FAB high voltage fab line there. Gets tested in Fremont, puts into an implant in Uruguay, and then goes from there all over the world. So one of our principles is that we only work on things that we're better at than anybody else in the world. So we understand the interface between a piece of platinum and a spinal cord, I think better than anybody else in the world. That's where we put all our focus, and we outsource the rest to wherever we can find somebody who's good at it. And that's sort of who we are. I think we've sold about 5,000 implants or so at the moment, growing rapidly. It's a really successful product. Hard work, but a lot of fun.
Excellent, and lots to unpack there as we go around that supply chain piece, around the skills and the workforce.
Together of different people, and Neil saying about how he went to AWA Micro, and that was my first professional job, was there. It's sort of like all these things that come and go, like a river delta.
Thanks, Peter. Angus, I'm going to jump to you next and stay in the industry side. Can you tell us a little bit about you and the Memjet journey?
Sure. Memjet is based in Macquarie Park, opposite Optus in Lion Park Road. The company was born around about the year 2000 with a vision of dramatically speeding up inkjet printing. At the time, the only inkjet printers you could get scanned left, right across the page. As you know, you might have one that's very slow. So what we wanted to do instead of scanning is take the chips and array them along the full width of the page and pass the page underneath the head in a single pass. And with this product, which has 70,400 MEMS nozzles, we can do that in about a second. Full colour digital printing, 1 page per second. And if we also array these in that direction, we can go about 8 times faster than that, as we do in our larger commercial presses. We are a fabless company. We work with TSMC for CMOS in Taiwan, another company in Taiwan for the backside MEMS processing, and a company in Malaysia for the front-side MEMS processing. We do have a clean room in Macquarie Park, but that's just for final assembly. the printheads. My role with the company is the design, fabrication and testing of these inkjet chips.
Excellent. Thanks, Angus. Paige, you're a postdoctoral researcher at the ARC Centre of Excellence for Synthetic Biology, and Michael mentioned earlier the kind of opportunities for synthetic biology around semiconductors. Can you tell us a little bit about the ARC Centre and the work in the semiconductor space?
Yep, I'm a researcher here at Macquarie. So the Centre of Excellence in Synthetic Biology is funded obviously by the ARC. It's a 7-year program, and we have 9 nodes across Australia that are working in synthetic biology. Macquarie here is the head node, and we have over 250 researchers in this space. Now, recently, we've started to venture into the semiconductor area to see how we can collaborate with the SIPS lab here at Macquarie to see what projects we could bring together, whether that's synthetic biology helping semiconductors or semiconductors helping synthetic biology. We're also really lucky enough here within the centre to be next to the Australian Genome Foundry, which is one of the organisations within here at Macquarie Park. They are an incubator space for companies literally to come in and do their research, whether that's a startup company. The centre itself in the last 4 years has also spun out 9 companies using synthetic biology. So there's definitely some lessons there that we've been doing to actually get those companies up and running. And I think being situated here at Macquarie Park definitely makes that key.
I'm going to jump on that last comment that you just made. The design, the precinct design, the theory around precinct design is that there's opportunity for collision, there's shared knowledge, shared expertise, and that the narrowing of the gap between the understanding of how industry works and how academia works in the research sector. What do you think, what's been the kind of lived experience of the researchers within the Centre of Excellence in terms of interacting with the broader ecosystem of Macquarie, and do you think that the location here has been a positive piece, or could it have been the same elsewhere?
Right on that last part. So I've been, I guess, lucky enough to see 2 sides. Before I was here at Macquarie, I was at the University of Queensland for 10 years. And kind of that link between industry and academia or research, I feel like was very narrow. I mean, the ecosystem, I think, is changing across universities, and I do know that there's incubation space now happening at UQ, but I think Macquarie's ahead of the game. The minute I came to Macquarie University 3 years ago, immediately I was like, wait a minute, there's careers in industry. That bridge is a lot smaller. We can go between research and research, academia, and industry very easily. And I think the centre and being here at Macquarie, like I've seen so many opportunities for that happening. And we've even got industry partners coming to us at the centre. So we've got partnerships with Microbiogen, which is based here in Macquarie Park. We've got one of their researchers literally coming and working with us to get them upskilled to take back to their workplace. And vice versa, we're trying to upskill researchers so that they can then go into industry and work.
Great. I'll flip back to the other side. Peter, why are you at Mac Park? What's the history there, and what's your connection with the researchers that are here as well?
That's a hard question. We're at Mac Park because Sydney has a biomed cluster, for want of a better word. In fact, that's a good word. There's a lot of companies here like Cochlear, ResMed, there was Ventricore, but there's a lot of people in this general area who understand biomed, because an active implantable medical device is not just a chip, it's also tissue, material interfaces, all kinds of things going on, safety standards from the FDA and others and other regulators. So that sort of puts us in the Sydney region. We were for quite a while in Artarmon. We were using a clean room in Mars Road, the old Cochlear clean room. Cochlear booted us out of there, and there was a company here that had a clean room that they didn't need anymore. So that's why we're in Mac Park. But it's basically just, it's not, I guess, if you consider Artarmon to be part of Mac Park, then yeah, that's it. But it's this broader thing around this area, of which probably Macquarie Uni is roughly in the geographical centre, is why we're here.
We do hear that a lot, that it's facilities first, because they're rarer, and then moving forward. Angus, what's the story with them and Memjet and Macquarie
As
Park?
an R&D startup, we actually started in Balmain in the old manor house, and as we grew, we took on other buildings in Balmain and eventually ran out of space. And then when JDS Uniphase went bust, I think it was about 2006, they left an empty clean room in Macquarie Park, which was ideal for us, so we consolidated all our different sites into that one space, which had lots of offices and the clean room and lots of power for all our equipment needs, and we've been there ever since.
So anyone with clean room space, there's certainly a market to be had, and Tavor and I, our very first conversation was around clean room space in Western Sydney. How important is the, you talked about the ecosystem and all the different partners. How collaborative versus competitive is it in that space, and how much, in terms of staying in Australia and understanding where your company needs to be, what are the benefits of having that thriving cluster, as you called it, here?
So I mean, I find it interesting being here that these various organisations that I was only barely aware existed and hearing about them, I found that really interesting.
Well, that's why we have a precinct.
Probably a few missed opportunities there. But we collaborate very closely with University of New South Wales because they have a biomed engineering project.
Yep.
We get some great science graduates and engineering graduates out of Sydney University. So that's a lot of what we do is only done overseas, like, biocompatibility, that kind of stuff. It's hard to buy that in Australia.
Yep.
We get people from Cochlear and ResMed, so that's the main place and we've hired people from Solana as well, so.
Angus, you mentioned that the rezoning of Mac Park as an innovation precinct may impact your business.
Yeah, unfortunately our land's been rezoned as residential, and unfortunately it's much more valuable as high-rise apartments versus industrial, so we might have to move out in about 2 years.
I think that manor house in Balmain is empty, actually, by the way.
Yes, I don't know what's happened to that. It's kind of derelict now,
It is,
so we'll probably have to move way out west, unfortunately, to find a equivalent space with clean rooms and power.
Well, good luck with that, having been out there to try and do that. Paige, the companies that spin out of the COE, have they stayed local? Have they migrated and gone elsewhere? How close do you keep those kind of new fledgling companies?
So I think out of 9 of the spin-out companies, I think half of them are based here at Macquarie University. They have not fled yet.
Yep.
One of them does have a warehouse in Lane Cove, where they are doing a lot of, I guess, upscaling now with their product, but all of their R&D research is being done here at Macquarie University. On top of that, AGF, so the Australian Genome Foundry, actually have companies coming in. So they didn't spin out of Macquarie, but they have companies coming in, incubating to conduct their research within the university.
Great. Peter and Angus, what are the skills that are needed in parallel and in conjunction with the semiconductor skills that you talked about from an industry perspective in terms of making this real? Are there complementary technical skills? Are there commercial skills? What are the graduates and what do the trainees coming through need more of to be commercially successful in the way that you two have in your companies?
So I'm just going to look back. I'm old enough that I can look back on my career. It's coming close to the end. And I look at what I've done over my life, and I think I've spent too much of my time doing technology push. I think if I were to go back over it, somewhere along the line, in a failed startup, had a pile of books from on business, and I read those, and it really changed. It took a little while for it to sink in what it meant. I had to do another unsuccessful startup before it really sunk into me what it meant. And I think the current business, the Saluda did not start out as a spinal cord stimulation company business. We had no idea. We started out with a bunch of curious, hardworking people and an idea to do something interesting. We didn't know what it was. We sort of stumbled into the pain business because of the hospital at Royal North Shore. We stumbled into measuring evoked responses because of experience from Cochlear. We then went, hang on, we should build a closed-loop spinal cord stimulator. It took us 2 or 3 years from when we started. We did not start out with an idea other than to be curious and, to quote John Parker, that if you take any area of human knowledge and dig into it so that you understand it better than anybody else in the world, there's usually a lump of gold down there. And that was how we approached it, and our lump of gold happened to be in spinal cord stimulation for chronic pain. So.
That's very sage advice. Angus, anything to add to that around skills that you wish you'd had, or
Well,
skills that you're trying to hire for now?
Our needs for graduates and employees have evolved significantly over time. When we started as a stealth mode startup back in 2001, we had a load of PhDs while we were researching how to do this page-wide inkjet printing. Now the challenge is much more about scaling this thing up to high volume manufacture. So these days we're much more likely to hire a mechatronics type person or a process engineer. And we also have significant supply chain management needs. We have a whole team in Singapore devoted to ensuring the components that go into these print heads don't get obsoleted by our supplier companies. It's quite a challenge and very different to the early needs of our company.
Peter, your supply chain network sounded quite complicated. Similar strategy for you guys around supply chain?
We've largely outsourced.
Yeah.
Right, we've got a bunch of guys in a company called Integra, headquartered in Wichita, but they've got a big office in Fremont. But they're experts in high-rel military grade stuff, qualification. They do test for us, etc. So we outsource where we can.
Super. Paige, what is the university doing to round out both the technical expertise of the graduates, but also the kind of commercial acumen that's solving problems and working with industry?
I do know that the new PhDs starting next year can apply to be part of an industry stream or like a startup stream. So while they're going through their PhD, they'll be getting skills as well on how to do a startup company or like entrepreneurship type stuff. So I know that there is a researcher here or an academic here that is really trying to push to get that program up and running for 2025. So I know that's some of the things, and that's not just for like synthetic biology or biology, like that is for anyone doing a PhD at Macquarie within the FSC, the Faculty of Science. Yeah, I know the centre ourselves, we are offering programs for PhD students, masters, to just get skills in going into industry. So obviously we've got to focus on synthetic biology, but I think just overall training them up for an industry type setting can be translatable to any field, including semiconductors.
We're seeing a big rise in those industry PhD programs, and would encourage industry in the room to really get behind those programs as a way of bringing great talent into your business and making sure that talent then goes back into those university sectors to spread the word and bring their understanding of the KPIs and the stakeholders within the industry sector, not just the technology and moving it forward.
Can I just add something to that? For example, we've just applied for a PH Industry Link Scholarship where we have our PhD students still employed by the company and getting paid a full salary, but they're coming to us to do their PhD to get upskilled. So then they get all those skills, go back, and they haven't lost their wage. Like, they've been working there for 10 years. They don't want to go back onto a PhD stipend. So those opportunities are available. They are funded by the government. And I think more companies are taking the opportunity to use those scholarships.
Super. So maybe we can fill some of those gaps as we start to compete.
Jump in there as well. I mentioned earlier the challenges of scaling up to high volume manufacture, and I think earlier it was touched on that we're lacking in automation and robotics graduates here in Australia. There's a lot of talk about sovereign capability and reshoring manufacture. If we are to do that, then we'll need a lot more of that type of skill to compete with the low labour costs of Asia.
We will indeed. I've got a couple of minutes for questions from the floor before we wrap. Do we have any questions for our research or our industry leads? Yeah, one down the back.
Question for Peter. You mentioned you used Integra from the US. Who do you use for your ASIC design?
I might just repeat the question, Peter, just for the recording. So you used Integra for your... sorry, now I've missed the question because I was so keen to...
We use Integra for the packaging and test. Who do we use for ASIC design?
Thank you.
So there's a company, Radlogic, in Adelaide. They're a bunch of ex-Oztech guys, mostly. They do our ASIC design. We basically wrote the spec in collaboration with them. We pay them and they just crank out designs for us. We monitor the design process closely. Yeah, and they've done some amazing designs over the years. I have a list of their customers, which I'm not allowed to share, but it's an eye-opening list and they're really worth checking out.
Excellent. I've only got time for one more. If we've got, yeah, go down the front, Ben.
You go. I'll talk to Peter later. So, question to the panel broadly. Thinking about the place and thinking about more broadly in the supply chain, are there areas, I mean, Angus, you just mentioned automation, in particular automation and robotics, but are there other areas of the manufacturing industry in particular that you think could be better prepared to support a semiconductor industry locally? So I'm thinking more traditional metalwork, machining, additive manufacturing, injection molding, tool making, etc. Where do you see an opportunity for existing industry to actually grow and support a new or increasing semiconductor industry?
More broadly, thinking about it in terms of what should we be doing in semiconductors in Australia, there was a question earlier about should we have a local CMOS foundry. I'd recommend against that. CMOS foundries are, well, it's a commoditized service. It's produced at very high volume and low cost overseas by foundries such as TSMC. And the latest stepper equipment costs $350 million, and the rest of the fab equipment adds up to billions. So I don't think we have available that sort of investment capacity in Australia. And even if we did that, there would be no incentive for Australian companies to use that if it can be obtained more cheaply overseas. Then the Australian fabless companies will go overseas to get their wafers. And secondly, it takes decades to build up the kind of ecosystem that TSMC has around it, with graduates going into the fab and the equipment suppliers and whatnot. So I don't think that would be sensible. Having said that, Pascal said earlier, there's no impediment to all the bright researchers and graduates that come out of Australia's research facilities starting fabless companies and creating new IP using those overseas foundries. And secondly, I think we have opportunities to carve out new niches, compound semi with blue glass as an example, quantum computing. Microfluidics is an interesting one. If you're going to do a lab on a chip type thing and you're trying to pass cells through the chip, then you have much relaxed lithography needs. That's much lower resolution to get 100 micron cells through the fluidic paths. So I think the opportunity for Australia is in carving out new niches: silicon photonics, microfluidics, quantum computing, that sort of thing. We're good at inventing things. With regard to how the AMRF can contribute to that, well, I think you'll need at least some element of automation and robotics training. The trouble with that is it's very custom to whatever you're trying to make. So trying to fit that into a generic support capability might be challenging, unless you have just a generic tool that anyone can use, such as 3D metal printing, that, rapid prototyping of that sort of thing. I'm sure you'd get customers for that sort of thing.
Paige, are there particular areas within the synthetic biology space that Australia should be focusing on, within the semiconductors, or because that was quite the spectrum of options and technologies that we saw earlier from Michael?
Yeah, so one of the things that Macquarie University is doing is there's a massive bioinnovation workshop that's been run by Saki Pretorius. We literally have that on tomorrow, and he's kind of like forcing us to work with the semiconductors. But no, so like I'm literally working with Mike on a project where we're pitching a device where we've got cells talking to a chip and the chip's talking back to the cells to automate processes. We've got other guys that are putting in AI models to be able to help predict synthetic biology applications, and so therefore they're going to need chip technology. There's talks about creating specific chips to help us process our large data sets that are unique to us. And there's even talks of like literally doing data storage using DNA. So I think Macquarie University, particularly with the expertise that we have in the synthetic biology space, the nanomaterial space, the SIPS lab, like we are in a good opportunity to be able to create some of those interdisciplinary projects and even get a PhD student to, spearhead those projects. And we're going to get a new generation of people that have expertise in those spaces.
And I think that will be crucial. I'd like to thank the panel for their time and coming to talk to us about where the rubber hits the road in some of these areas. There's a lot of talk around what the next 20 years will hold in science and innovation, and a lot of the narrative is around the convergence of science areas that will come together to do something radically different that we couldn't do before. And so by bringing semiconductors into these other spaces and vice versa, we'll see a huge amount of disruption in the next few years. And so we hope we're here for the ride, and the Macquarie Park is positioning as well to continue that.